Welcome, dear colleagues, dear participants. We are now beginning the press conference of Maxim Timchenko, DTEK Director General. We'll be talking about the energy sector of Ukraine, European choice and crisis solutions. Thank you very much for joining this event. I'd like to thank those who are now with us in this room and also colleagues who are watching us online. We will be working today for approximately 1 hour and 30 minutes. In the very beginning, Maxim Timchenko will make a presentation, and then we'll have around 40 minutes for the Q&A session. We will ask the journalists who are present with us in this room to ask questions first, and then I hope we will have enough time to hear questions from colleagues who are watching us online. Now I'm giving floor to Maxim Timchenko, please.
Доброе утро, уважаемые коллеги. Очень приятно видеть вас в этом зале и тех, кто нас
to see you. We have a new format of communication. We've started that format a year ago, and I believe this is a fairly successful format as we allow to speak to a wider audience to explain our position, and this would help everyone to understand the situation around the energy sector of Ukraine. Just recently, on the 21st of December last year, the DTEK had presented a long-term strategy of the development of our company, and there were a lot of messages on the part of DTEK on the development of our company as well as the energy sector of Ukraine, and all of our presentation is all about the long-term development and the European choice of Ukraine. And that is why today I would like to speak about the current situation in this sector, while through the prism of the current development of Ukraine and our European aspirations, which are identified by the trends that we've also mentioned before. We shouldn't speak about any synchronization of the European market and the Ukrainian market if the global trends, which are the fundamental traits for the future development, if they would not be reflected in the course of the Ukrainian development as well as the course of the operation of the sector. The liberalization of the market is our hope. We hope that the market would be truly hold a market. It would be open, limitless market when it is not the desire of anyone to rule the market that would exist. The transformation of the power generation mix is important. This is all about the generation mix. It's all about the renewables, all about the generation processes, the green electricity. Of course, it's all about the customer centricity process, because this is exactly what the companies are working for. The companies are producing the heat. The companies are producing the reliable electricity supplies, so we won't have to speak about the outages or problems with electricity. It's all about the responsibility of the state in the frames of our commitments for green electricity as well as European commitments. Now, this is the framework that our industry has to comply with in order to implement the political statements that we heard over the recent years, and a lot has been accomplished since 2013, when the first law was passed on the new market and the frames of the second energy package. Then there were certain amendments to this law, and a renewed law on the new market was established and passed in 2017, and that was the launch, a start for introducing a new model of electricity market. Then there was an unbundling in 2018, and that was an obligatory requirement under the third energy package of the European Union, and we have implemented that as well. Then in the mid of 2019, we have launched a new energy market model. Then in 2020, we have signed a memorandum with renewable investors. Then, starting from the 1st of January 2021, we have introduced a REB regulation. And here we have the 2023. This is the year when we should have a synchronization of the energy sector of Ukraine and the European Union. We should have a full liberalization and synchronization of the electricity market, and I do hope that by that year we'll have an emission trading system in operation, and it's been operating for quite a while in our European partners. This is the roadmap that should lead to the synchronization of our physical systems, but to the synchronization of our electricity markets as well. I believe that the movement and the integration of Ukraine towards Europe should start with the energy sector and the synchronization of the energy market. I hope this is the most important milestone that we have to complete and not to omit. It's not only about the synchronization of the energy sector, it's all about the normative acts, it's all about the independent regulators, the lack of non-market and non-European rules of law. And this is exactly what we want to discuss today, how to ensure the fulfillment of 2023. The most important step forward was the mid of 2019, when we've started a new model for the electricity market, when the major formats and the major market segments of a European market were implemented in Ukraine. I believe that many of my colleagues and the journalists already saw this graph. And unfortunately, it's the second or the third time that we are presenting our position to the public. We're showing this graph. Unfortunately, the market only existed for 3 months in its stable condition. And afterwards, there were a number of decisions made by the national regulator that resulted in the volatile situation on the market that we can see until today. Should we speak about the break-even of the energy system? Well, at first, we had calculations for the market, and they were made by the ministry and the regulator, and they were verified by our Western partners as well. And this model of market clearly showed that there is a break-even point when the financial system is in balance. Although the political desires and lack of understanding, or maybe some other motives, primarily on the part of regulator, resulted in a situation that for a period of over 1 year, the whole energy system is working below the break-even point. And this is the most important step that we have to discuss. I don't want to go into the specifics of those decisions. Still, we can understand that the market will not be able to operate properly when we have low stockpiles of coal and high outage. In the beginning of January, we have the price that drops 1.5 times lower than the break-even point. It seems that we have something wrong. Now, this is the fundamental reason for those challenges, including the financial challenges that we have in the market. And this is something that not only the DTEK company understands, but the other market players understand as well, except for non-professional traders. I don't want to call them profiteers. Trading is a science. It's an art to work within the rules of the civilized world. The trading in Ukraine is all about the manipulation and the work of profiteers. And should you take the market players, only those who manage to transform rapidly, only those who manage to use the gaps or the loops that existed in these new market laws, they manage to transform and they manage to receive the income. And here is another story and another example. Why do we have a financial disbalance as we have it right now? Since the implementation of new model, there were price caps or cost limitations introduced. And they were the one introduced by the regulators, and it was something new for all the market players and for our company as well. In order not to have a price shocks or rapid increase of the prices, price caps were implemented for a period of 9 months. We believe that was a wise decision at the start of a new market, but unfortunately, we still have those price caps, and the availability of those price caps artificially produces the problems that we have right now. Let me give you an example. Should you take a look at the situation from the financial standpoint and the work of the energy generating companies in Europe, we'll have that some days. Last year, we had a warm winter, we had a lot of coal, we had a lot of capital frozen in the form of coal on the warehouses. This year, we have a different situation with the weather, and I don't think that anyone could guess what the weather would be like next year. The air temperature has a great impact on the balance of production and consumption of electricity. How it operates in Europe, whenever there is a cold weather in winter, then they start operating with the gas for 1 day or 2 days, but using a gas at the electricity outage or the need to increase the outage, even in the lack of coal for 1 day, for 2 days or 3 days, it's much better from the financial standpoint than to stockpile 2 million tons of coal at the warehouse. This is the economic laws, and they are fairly understandable to everyone. And what is the situation in our case? Let me give you an absolutely clear example. If we switch on the gas units, then the price caps in Ukraine would allow to to have an income of 50 euros per 1 megawatt hour. So, if we have a private or a public company, would it be rationally, do they have any stimul to switch on the gas units whenever their cost is covered by 50 or 70%? We have learned this lesson in Luhansk station 1 year ago. Everyone remembered when there was problems with coal supplies from Russian Federation to the Luhansk station, and you won't be able to transport coal through different routes. So we had to operate for a couple of months using the gas. So initially, we had an agreement. That is the public service obligation and agreement. We had to operate ineffectively and efficiently, although to provide the electricity to the region. And the availability of the price caps forced us to operate without any income, but with losses of hundreds of millions of hryvnia, and there was an agreement with the government that those losses will be compensated. A year has passed and nothing was compensated, and now we have a debt to NAK Naftogaz, we have penalties, we have to try to search for resources, and now many of the energy generating companies learned the experience of DTEK in Luhansk, and they are not willing to switch on the electricity production units operating on gas. And now they're simply not switching on those gas units. This is just to support my statement on the deficit of the energy capacities. We don't have any deficit in the energy production capacities. We have more than enough capacities to cover the needs of Ukraine, and we absolutely have enough capacities not to import the electricity, although the reasons that we'll be talking about today have resulted the deficit of energy capacities. And now some of the politicians tell that we have a deficit in energy production capacities, let's import electricity from Russia and Belarus. This is not true. Now, what is the result of disbalance in the market price, which is regulated by the price caps, and the true cost and the original cost? Take a look at the 2019-2020, and we have received the data that we received from the regulator, and here is the market price. You can work at a price that is less than the fixed cost for a certain period of time, but when you're doing that for a second year already, we can already see the consequences, and the consequences are the total losses on the part of all the energy generating companies. You can talk to Energonatom, you can talk to TPPs, you can talk to PSPPs, and everyone would tell that they have received losses as the result of 2020. Losses because the fixed cost is below the market price. And this resulted in a significant problems with the payments, plus the tariff statement by Ukrenergo to fund the public service obligation, the failure to make certain decisions on the part of the NURC, the failure to make additional payments from the budget. This has resulted in the total debt and the amount of 50 billion Ukrainian hryvnia. And over the whole period of operation of the previous market, we had around 27 billion Ukrainian hryvnia in debt, but that is over the whole years of operation of the old market, considering the work on the temporary uncontrolled areas. Now we have an absolutely different situation. We have losses and debts in the amount of over 50 billion Ukrainian hryvnia for just a year and a half. We have to provide additional money to the state-owned mines. This is the diagnosis, and it clearly shows how the model of market works. Of course, we can say, okay, these are the ones who should be blamed for that. But let's try to look at the current situation in the market and then nominate the guilty one in order to justify the lack of professionalism on the part of some individuals. Now let's have a more specific conversation about two topics. Why don't we have a coal, and why do we have a problem with the outage capacities at certain production units? And here is the history of 2020. What was the situation with the warehouse and the coal production indicators? The first quarter of 2020, our company had produced 1.9, 2.2 tons of coal per month. That was a standard graph for Pavlograd Ugal. And other mines. Then we have a warm winter, a drop in the energy consumption, more green energy, and then all of those factors gathered together, and we had a situation when 2.8 million of tons of coal were located in the warehouses. And that presented a threat to the TPPs that were full of coal and for our coal mines. So certain decision had to be made. Either we have to consume that coal, and that coal could be consumed should we increase the production capacities of the TPPs to burn the coal at our TPPs, and they could be burned at the stations of Centrenergo, or we should stop the coal production. So the first option did not really depend on us. So the balance was the follows, that DTEK won't need the coal. And this is not the physical systems only. There were other factors as well. And when Centrenergo and the other market players started burning the cheap gas in the summer, as you know, there was a decrease in the prices for gas in summer. That was economically efficient because the gas was cheaper than the coal to burn. But that only took place for 2 months. And nobody in the state thought that we've learned some experience over 15 years, that you have to prepare for the winter in May and June. You have to understand the plan for coal consumption as well as the plan for repairs and maintenance. And this is the absolute necessity. We tried to state that, but nobody heard us. So we had to temporarily stop the operation, the Pavlograd Ugle, and the other mine as well. So it was for the first time that we have temporarily stopped Pavlograd Ugle for that period of time. Now you can see the coal production in April, May. There was a drop in coal production by 2-fold. So we managed to consume some of the coal in the warehouses. Then we restarted the coal production, and this coal industry is fairly inert, and it took us some time to re-establish the original coal production levels. We offered long-term contracts to the coal consumers in the country, and nobody wanted to sign long-term contracts with us. And at that point, the coal prices were fairly low because the gas prices were low, and the price for coal at the hubs dropped to $45. And we offered the situation for the European hubs, although nobody expressed desire to sign long-term contracts. Now, what was the situation in the later months? We continued operation, and as you can see on this graph, as of the 1st of October, we have 2.5 million tons of coal, and nobody had any questions about whether we will have sufficient coal for the winter. What happened next? And then there was problems with maintenance at the NPPs. They haven't mentioned to finalize that in due time. I believe that was the reason for the chaos and the disbalance in the market, because neither our company nor the other market players had sufficient money to run proper maintenance and overhaul. And we mentioned that as one of the most important aspects that regulator had to listen to and had to take into consideration too. Then again, we have a low temperature, an increase in demand, partially because of the quarantine, as we can see that households started to increase the consumption of electricity. And so all these factors accumulated in a situation of November and December when we started to consume a lot of coal from the warehouses. We have fulfilled the contract for Centrenergo. There were a lot of fakes that DTEK is not supplying coal to us or something like that. Let me once again underline, no matter the difficulties we had, we have supplied 150,000 tons in December, in October, then another 250 tons in December, and then the remainder of the coal was supplied in January. We have signed another contract with Ukrenergo, and in February we're supposed to supply 250,000 tons of coal. And no matter the difficulties we have, we fulfill the dates for the supply of coal at 100%. Now, this is an important slide. We're going to talk about the forced outage rate, and this is the second reason and a second question that we face. Take a look at our company. The forced outage rates starting from 2019, this is the official statement, that is to prepare for the winter, we have spent 3 billion hryvnia in 2018. In 2020, we've spent twice less that amount. Take a look at the situation for Energo-Atom. They have the same indicators. So the total deficit of money on the market, because of the disbalance in the governance, resulted in a situation that we had to start saving money on repairs and maintenance, because a lot depends on the coal of the coast. Then 5 to 7%, that is the salary, then the same for the taxes, and the rest 20%, this is something we had to use to save the money. So we spent all the money we had to buy coal, to pay salaries, and of course the last was the money to be allocated on repairs. The result was 4 times increase in forced outage rate at our companies, and somebody told fakes that we try to stop the units purposefully. I believe that those people should stop distributing those fakes, because they don't have any arguments. They're trying to blackmail DTEK. We're trying to purposefully stop the energy production units. Back in December, I told, I don't know whom exactly, but to someone in the ministry, I told, you can send the inspection to our TPPs, and we will open the doors. We can demonstrate every unit that we have. We can provide you with all the statistics, with all the technical information. Why should we stop these energy production units? And I told that publicly. We can do that once again. If there are any doubts, if somebody provides information, this fake information to the politicians, you can go to our energy production stations and to see with your own eyes that this is the emergency repairs stop and not the purposeful stop. If we don't have the money, we won't be able to spend them on repairs and maintenance. The lack of repairs resulted in a forced outage rate that we have right now. Despite the increase of the forced outage rate, take a look at the load level on our energy production units. In November, December, and January, the share of DTEK TPPs was around 62, And take a look at the January. We had 74%, then 64, 66, 74%. This is over those 3 months that we've been operating. On the overall, if you take a look at the dynamics of the weather, in 2018 we had 75%, then 70, then 67%. And you can see that the share of the energy production was reduced from 30 to 26%. Indeed, the segment of heat generation shrinks, although within this segment we do operate while using all the equipment. There is a difference between the January of 20, that is 57%, and the January of 2021, that is 75%. And that means that DTEK has managed to supply the electricity production outputs of the other stations that were closed in order to not to burn down the expensive gas. Of course, we have a larger load on the energy production units. Of course, because of the lack of proper repairs and maintenance, we have to stop some of the energy production units. And of course, we're trying to repair those units as faster as possible. We have Eldar Saleev, is the general manager of DTEK, and he can provide you with details. And I believe with the proper governance, we have to express deepest words of gratitude to those people as part of repair teams who work 3 times faster. Talking about the Zaporozhye station that was on the news because of the outage, and I clearly understand the situation for another market players. If that was on the part of Zaporozhye regional electricity, they were having some troubles with the electricity and the energy production. We have to say that you did great, that your emergency protection system worked out, and we managed to somehow compensate the troubles because of the outage of the Zaporizhzhia station. Even more, the unit started to reestablish the operation within the nights because the company responded in a fast motion, and the market managed not to see that problem when we had a power outage of 150 megawatts. It was a very fast response and cooperation with Ukrenergo, and we do have a very professional contact with Ukrenergo. And even at that situation, we synchronized our operation, and we synchronized and cooperated properly in order to restore the energy production. And we had a lot of situations like that. But then we have a press secretaries in the situation around the operation of the units in DTEK. We have a perfect press service in the DTEK, and they can provide the true information on the current situation in unit. We don't need any supporters, we don't need any assistance, because they provided with false information. Now, here's some reasons and the causes for the problem. The peculiarity of our company is to provide the true information. It can be good or worth, but we believe that the causes of the industry crisis is the lack of professional team in the industry. Then second, manual regulation of the energy market. This is something that we keep saying all the time. Then manipulation of traders in the market. And we wanted to pick up a word, but we failed to find a proper word. There is only one word that exists, that is the financial genocide of the power generating companies. If the system operates properly, well, that system would not generate the debt of around 50 billion Ukrainian hryvnia. It is only due to the lack of professionalism and some other factors that we could have accumulated that amount of debt. Now, what do we do for the future? there are two options available to us. And unfortunately, as of now, we use the second option. The first is the integration with the European energy market, and I believe that all of the colleagues and the market players and the journalists and the authorities, they have to identify the mission for themselves to make sure they fulfill every goal by 2023. That is the integration of our markets. There are a lot of speculations, manipulations, and we would be able to avoid all of that if we will work by the European rules. Any issues regarding monopoly will be terminated because of the new market, and the European regulators would not allow to use those practices and the mechanisms that currently used in the energy market in Ukraine. This is the option that we supported all the time throughout the history of our company. Then there is a second alternative, that is the increase of import from Russia and Belarus. And some of the politicians are saying that it's only 1 or 2 or 3%, and that has no impact on anything. And I believe it has an impact. Whenever we have an import, now we have a commercial import. It's not the deficit of electricity production capacities. And you have to understand this. Whenever there is problems with electricity, that is the emergency assistance. That is something that is produced and bought by the Ukrenergo, and now we have the private companies buying electricity from Russia and Belarus, and this is 3 or 4%. It's not that important. What is important is that this dumping import produces a disbalance in the system. Well, I don't think that our consumers should pay more for electricity, but even those countries that are using the synchronized market, you can compare the prices in Hungary and Slovakia. The price in the country depends on the system that the country is operating and the generating capacities that the country is operating. The prices in the system can be higher in our country than in the other countries because of the system. And if we receive 3% of electricity from Russia and Belarus at the prices which are lower than ours, which are created by Belarusian and Russian companies, now this results in a situation that our prices become lower, and somebody says that, yes, we have allowed certain impact for it and then allowed to reduce the prices for the industry. We will go back to a situation when the industry will come up and say, we need electricity and we won't be able to produce that because of this outage rate. And if the situation will not change, we'll have the same outage rate. And then not even Russia and not even Belarus will be able to help, because our fundamental market players will have significant troubles because of the energy production unit situation. And you have to understand, this is the units that were constructed during the Soviet Union times. The average life cycle of the unit is around 50 years, and they were constructed over 50 years ago. Once again, we're talking about the investment climate and retrofitting coal production units. Now we're choosing what should we construct, NPPs or the wind station. Every calculation shows that it's cheaper to construct a wind station. And this is the story that I wanted to tell you as well. Now, from the experience of working in our company, what are the key factors of success? I don't want to give a lot of advices to the authorities of our country, but I think the governance and the control of a large company is somehow similar to the one that you do whenever you're controlling the industry. You need to have a team, you need to have a strategy, and you need to have an execution of the strategy or the decisions that were made. Now, what do we have with the team? This is the problem, because we had 5 heads of the Ministry of Energy rotated over a year. We don't have a team, we don't have a single leader, responsibility, the readiness to take responsibility, the readiness to establish a consistent team, not a team for 3 months or 6 months. 60 regulatory acts were adopted by the NERC, changing the market rules. What do you think? Can you work at the market when the market rules are changing that frequently? I sometimes hear that it's like playing football when the rules of the game are keep changing every time. There are rules how to play football introduced by the UEFA, and so the regulator has to make sure that everybody would play by the rules. So let's make sure that we have the UEFA rules of the game and not the Ukrainian rules of the game, which are changing every 2 or 3 months. And the regulator should identify its own role, the role of an agency that controls the overall situation and not tries to regulate the prices. And then there is 3 industry management centers. We have a Ministry of Energy that is unfortunately having troubles this year. We have a regulator, and I think this regulator has to learn how to work in a European manner. And then we have a parliamentary committee, yet another management center who thinks that they can interfere within the market. And the situation we receive, I'm sure everybody remembers that old Russian story. Talking about this strategy, we have authored the strategy for the development of DTEK company, and our peculiarity lies in the fact that we're talking about strategic plans, and we're trying to gradually fulfill those plans. And the success of our company lies in the consistency of our efforts. Here's the story with Ukraine. Another team, another set of documents of a strategic level. Well, it looks systematically, but you're afraid of even looking at that. We need a strategy. You can write a strategy real fast, but what is important is to have that strategy in a consistent way, so that this strategy would not be changed with every single minister or every single decision of the Verkhovna Rada, so that there would be a personal responsibility for the implementation of that strategy on the part of the ministry, and not the situation as we have it right now, when every new leader arrives and it brings a new rules, resulting in a chaos for the market players, because they fail to understand the trends for the development of the country. The declared goals of the state should confirm with their actual movements. On the one hand, they support the renewables. On the other hand, what we have right now, it's absolutely unspoken. We've learned and managed to approve the memorandum. The market players agreed to retrospective prices for green electricity. Just 3 months after that, and we violate the market rules as well. And let me agree that 40% of the debt as of April would be repaid by the end of the year. There were even a mechanism for repaying the debt through the financing of the state banks. Now, in the final moment, a decision was made not to allocate those money on the fulfillment of this memorandum. And once again, we should remember about the outage rates and many other things. Green generation, green electricity is our future. and we depend on the construction of additional facilities for green electricity. We should use the potential of Ukraine. And sending this sort of signals to the investors is really a bad policy on the part of the state. We're talking about the liberalization of the market, while at the same time we still have price caps in the market. We're talking about the energy independence and the stable system, while at the same time we have an import of electricity. Well, we do have sufficient energy production capacities on our own. Another illustrative example of market regulation, price caps. I'm sure there is a lot of interesting stories behind that. In Germany, it's 3,000 euro per megawatt hour. Price cap for Ukraine is around 50 euro per megawatt hour. So in our case, the price caps are used to regulate the price. In the Western markets, they play a different role. They make sure there is not price shock, but they allow to use gas for a day or two to produce electricity without violating the price caps. Balancing market. The essence of the balancing market is if you plan properly the amount of electricity, you buy that like 3 hours ahead of time or 6 hours ahead of time, and of course you pay more. In our case, the situation is different. The intraday market price is lower than a day ahead market price for the electricity. This is the true example of the situation that we have with the regulation of these markets. Now let's recall once again the rules of football. They are established by the Europe, and we have to obey them as well. Liberalization of the tariffs. That is a very complicated topic. It's a political topic. And this is the topic that we have to take openly and tell the society openly. I sometimes hear that we have the largest prices of electricity for the industry producers. Here's the official statistics. The retail tariff for the consumers in 2020, it is 2 times less than an average price in Europe, and it's the price that's similar to our neighbors. Now, the rate for the households is the lowest in Europe, even lower than the neighboring countries, 4.5 lower if compared to the average price in Europe. And that adds to the situation that we have in the market today. There is a price for the product, and if we want to have a price that is an equivalent to the product, then we will have a crisis. The state has to control the social factor. It has to support the population who is unable to pay the full price. So let's everyone do their own business so that the state would fulfill their own responsibility, that is to support the population unable to pay the market price, while the producers of the electricity, they will produce the electricity. And now this social responsibility was shifted to the producers of electricity, because the price that is being paid, that is the social price for the kilowatt hour. And in conclusion, I would like to reiterate our key statement. 2023 is the year that we have to start a new life, a life by the European rules, with no populism, with no political statements, with the responsibility being taken by the regulators and by the market players. What do you need for that? You need a professional team, you need a financial balance, and I also mentioned that in the beginning of the year you have to introduce a proper balance. How many money do you have in the system? and the money is the tariff to the population, the tariff to the industry, and then the other sources of money. So we have three sources of money. Now we have to properly reallocate the money between the market players, between the network companies, the Ukrenergo, the NPPs, the renewables. This is the financial balance. This is the responsibility of the regulator. They have to make this balance and pay the internal debts. We won't have any synchronization if we have the debts like that in the system. Without solving the problem with those debts of numerous billions of Ukrainian hryvnia, then we have to move away from the manual regulation of the market or liberalization of the tariffs. These are the obligatory conditions that would allow us to synchronize the markets. I believe that Ukrenergo does a great job in terms of complying with the specifications. It is the ministry's responsibility and the regulator's responsibility to undertake the steps necessary for the synchronization of the markets. Thank you for your attention. I think we can go straight to questions.
Thank you very much. Now we are moving on with the Q&A session. And I will remind you that we have with us Dmytro Sakharuk, Vitaly Butenko, and Director General DTEK Energo, Eldar Saliev. So they can also join the Q&A session and explain some issues in detail. So who's going to go first, please? And use the mic.
Olga Melnik, you provided a detailed information on the problems of the energy market. Can you provide the major problems that the energy market of Ukraine is facing right now? Well, the financial disbalance, that is the first. The thing that the energy producing companies are receiving losses as part of their operations. Then the resulting problem because of the outage rate and lack of preparedness to the winter, both in terms of our equipment and in terms of sufficient amount of coal to be stored in the warehouse. All of these problems and challenges could be resolved when we'll have a proper market price for electricity and we won't have the debts as we have it right now.
Дякую. Наступне запитання, Дмитро.
Добрий день, Дмитрий
Dmitry Sidoruk, you've mentioned the distributing companies. The State Property Fund is about to submit the shares of some of the public companies for the tenders. Would you be interested in buying some of the shares of the public companies? We will respond only when we'll get a proper information. Of course, we are interested in buying the shares for Odessa Regional Energy production facilities. Speaking on the majority shares, we'll take a look at the conditions. It is interesting for us, and we believe that the introduction of RAPs and the receiving investment resources is important for us. We'll continue with that. We'll continue with investments. We'll try to raise the networks and the grids to a higher level. Going back to the Zaporozhye station, it's all about the grids. And the emergency they had there was because of the grids. And if there would be proper conditions for the tender, we'll participate in that tender. Good afternoon, Sergei Golovko, Business Censor. If possible, I have three questions, two very brief questions, and the other one is a wider one. It was very interesting to hear about the profitability, and you gave us the important price of 75 euros, where there are no losses for the energy production level. What is the fixed cost when there won't be any losses, because we've heard 1 hryvnia 30 kopecks that allow to sell thermal generated electricity without any losses. Second question, you had a number of decisions related to the personnel of your company. You've replaced Dmytro Sakharuk from DTEK Energy. Everybody calls him a wise man. And then the crisis happened and you moved him to DTEK. And the other question regarding the traders. You have your own trader here. What is the difference between the DTEK trading and the trading of Pritiga or United Energy? Maybe you can tell us the difference between these tradings. Well, I'll start from the final question. The trader is so much respectful because he tries to use the European standards. I will tell you about the difference. Our trader does not claim the equipment for the balancing market without the production capacities. So he's not trying to trade the capacities that he would not be able to offer. He's not buying the resource of Energoatom for resell that on a day-ahead market, and he buys that resources in order to sell that to the final user. I can add more and more aspects. We're not hating anyone. It's just that we're trying to work normally, in a normal commercial manner, and if we add more to that, I hope that at a certain point of time you can go to Vitaly's office and he will tell you how the European Trading Company operates. In our case, the traders were turned into an office with 5 people, chief accountant, director, and maybe 3 or 4 traders. And in case of a civilized market, it's a whole system that operates properly in order to offer civilized trading procedures. And we can share what sort of trading has to exist in the market, how the analytics works, what systems are implemented, how do you prognosticate the markets in Ukraine and the neighboring countries, how much money we have invested to ensure the operation of a system and a platform in order to prepare for 2021, 2022. So the traders are working not to resell either the production of Energoatom or resell the air. That is the third question. Now, Dmitry Sakharuk, a wise person, and I fully support that. He's got a wonderful reputation. He worked for many years in our company, and that's why we have promoted him. Now he's the executive director of the DTEK, my deputy, a key person in the company, and his mission is the transformation to green electricity, adoption of European rules, the ESG. So those issues that are absolutely important for every company willing to operate in future. So he is dealing with all the issues regarding the governance of the DTEK. So let's say non-production related issues. In the same time, he's the part of our team, and that's why he can tell more on that. And the first question regarding the fixed cost. What was the date for that report, and what was the data it was used? Well, we have to look at that report. If that report is based on $45 in Rotterdam, that's one fixed price. If we have $65 or $70, that is the other fixed cost. We show the actual data that is being taken from the NERC reporting and inaccuracy information.
Rostislav now, please. Thank you.
Rostislav Shapravsky, RBK, Ukraine. In one of the graphs on coal, you have showed the dynamics for stocks of coal and what was the dynamics on coal production. And we saw that most of the coal was burnt in November, and the fourth quarter showed a drop in the coal stockpiles. In the same time, the dynamics of coal production of state mines and DTEK mines was the same. Why wasn't there? It was an increase in the coal production. Was that the ceiling or the top production level they had in the coal mines? Why they weren't trying to contract any import for coal? I mean, they already saw the situation that they have a rapid drop in the stockpiles of warehouse in order to have certain coal for the safety. And this second question also about the coal. Just recently, Mr. Tarasuk mentioned that there will be an inspection of TPPs, whether they have sufficient coal on the warehouses, whether they correspond to their license agreements. What are the possible sanctions or the penalties if there is no sufficient coal in the TPPs, and according to the license they have to have more coal? Speaking on the production level, in October we had the record number of stockpile in the warehouses, and with all the situation we had to slow down the production capacity of coal. The Davropolia had 5 working days per week. And when we saw that there is a problem with the coal, we started to introduce the 7-day working week. But the coal industry is inert. You need to invest, you need to procure new equipment. We can do that, but the public mines, they can't. They don't have additional resources for that. So starting from November, we started to increase the production, although because of the inert level of coal, we could do that, but it had to take some time. We cannot produce more because of technical reasons. This is the answer. Currently, DTEK is producing as much coal as possible, and we produce as much electricity as possible from a technological standpoint. The other question about the import of coal, the contracts on the import of coal, that was something we started to discuss back in November, and it is a difficult question considering the neighbors that we have. We're buying electricity for them, but whenever you ask for coal production, it's always a problem. And in case of an anthracite, it's really a problem. Let me answer this question. Ukraine has no opportunity to produce our own anthracite. We have only one coal mine, Obukhovska, that is able to produce that. We can produce 150,000 to 200,000 tons per month. In order to receive additional resources, you need to get a quote from Russia. We have received that quotes. Then, because of political reasons, those quotes were reduced, so we don't have regularity in the production of coal. And when we saw the situation regarding the burning of coal, and once again I would like to remind you, we produce as much coal as possible, but we burn more than we did last year and than we've calculated in the beginning of the year. And in order to reimburse that, to compensate that lack of coal, we try to establish more contracts with other countries on the import of G-grade coal. And once again, we comply our commitments with Ukrenergo on the supply of 250,000 tons of coal. We produce as much coal as possible, and we import the coal in order to overcome the disbalance. And answering those questions about the situation in DTEK, I can reassure everyone that in February, in March, which is a very difficult period, we will use as much equipment as necessary, and this equipment will be fully supplied with either the gas or the coal in order to ensure proper production capacities. We have certain limits for gas burning. At the same time, we understand that we have to produce electricity no matter the outages. And speaking about, what about the inspection? You can take a look at the reports on the coal. You can do the whole inspection for 3 hours. Okay, no problem. You can do an inspect. Speaking on the sanctions, it's not the question to us, it's the question to a regulator. What is the consequence of those inspections? Just simply willingness to punish. Well, we got used to these activities on the part of regulators, but before signing penalties, I would advise the regulator to see themselves in the mirror and to ask themselves a question and to try to somehow understand and explain the situation on the market. If that was only one company who had the problem, but that is the situation for the whole companies, well, you have to ask yourself a question, why is that situation? Instead, you should gather everyone, you should discuss the reasons, you should start the lessons learned process, either using the regulators platform or the committees platform, and the committee is fairly active, but unfortunately not active where it's really necessary. Speaking on the sanctions, we'll see the inspections, and the inspection can be done real fast. You simply need to take the report on the amount of coal in the warehouse. I'd like to ask a number of questions. One is the continuation of Sergei Golovnyov's question on the appointment of Dmytro Sakharuk. You didn't have a position of executive director of DTEK, so you created this position, and a few versions on that have appeared. Some would say that Maxim Timchenko is starting to prepare a heir for himself, or the DTEK is getting ready for radical changes from the standpoint of its own business, understanding that thermal generation is the dying business, so to say, and you are trying to reorient on decarbonization. What is the right version? The second question is regarding the return of the rented mines. We always think of DTEK as the company that is trying to plan for a number of years ahead. Is that because we have a drop in demand for coal? Should we think that the return of those mines is related to some sort of a first stage of efforts to reduce the number of efforts of DTEK in thermal production and coal production areas? And the third question is regarding an increase of prices for electricity. Right now, this question is being discussed in between the authorities and the market players, and if the authority would take a decision to increase the market prices, then we would have a situation which is very close to the situation with the prices of the gas, when it's not the consumer buys for the gas, but the subsidies are paying for the gas. Have you calculated the final reaction on the part of consumers? Who would be ready to pay the prices that you think are justified? Thank you. Thank you for the question. First, Speaking about the DTEK plans, we had a fairly detailed statement in November. We've presented with our strategy, with our consistent moves in future. Speaking on the development of green electricity, this is our priorities, and reduction of thermal generation is evidently our decision. But please don't make our investors afraid that thermal energy is the dying business. No, it's not dying. Based on our calculations, this business will stay for at least 10 years. It's all the question of capacity is. This business will have an important role to play on the balancing market. We won't be able to construct a lot of renewable facilities. We'll look at different ways how we can use the infrastructure to include the recycling and disposal of waste. This is the difficult problem for Ukraine. We believe that the infrastructure of our TPPs would allow to solve this problem. And we believe that DTEK is the company with future. It will continue to develop in future. Speaking of Dmitry, in the KPIs and the requirements to our top managers, there is always a succession planning when we do have a successors. And this is something that is within the company rules or within the company policy. So in a company, there always has to be a successor in company, and academy plays an important role in here. So a successor is the top priority for every top manager, including me. Speaking on law checks of Dmitry in the cooperative center, it's also a question of management and the correct management system. There could be 6 or 7 direct subordinates, and we have 6 operational holdings subordinated to the corporate center. If you take general corporate solutions, while the non-productive functions like communication, environment, risk management, international relations, and there is a whole range of other functions has to be fulfilled by a spend breaker, the one to control those functions. And so, out of 15 direct subordinates, we decided to change that and to use the scientific approach, so to say. So Dmitry has started to lead those functions, and we have fulfilled this transformation process as per the rules of the European companies. So Dmitry's task is to bring those functions to a European level. We have to be prepared for 2023, not only from the point of business, from the point of production. We have to combine all these functions into ESG, the environment social governance concept. So Dmitry is the lead person in our company for ESG. Speaking of tariffs, are you talking about the industrial or how consumers or households? Well, taking a look at your graph, some say that we have the largest prices for households and for the industry. Well, I don't want to interfere within the economy of the business. I know the solution of Interpie. The Interpie solution is by importing from Russia. So it's a question of a price of a system. There is a price in certain country took out of a large contract, and there is another prices. If Eurostat is not the one that you should trust, well, then you can listen to anybody. I don't think anyone would be happy with the increase of rates. I don't want to buy more for cell phones, but we don't have any problems with cell phone operators. And the question of social services like heat, like electricity, like gas, it's always a political question in any country. It's a complicated question. It's a natural conflict of interest between the energy-producing companies and the society. And there is a regulator that has to play its role. It's not us to explain the rates or tariffs or to insist on something. We want to have a chance to exist in a market that is properly regulated by the rules without unprofessional regulation. And the question about the tariff, it's a question to the state and how the state would be able to explain the tariff to its citizens. And second, how it would be able to evaluate the level of the population and how the state will support the population. It's the responsibility that the state has to pay. We want the state to make decision. That is the tariff, or we should have another tariff, and to be responsible for that tariff. It's not the regulator who has to introduce the financial chaos on the market, as we have it over the past year and a half.
Можливо, по одному запитанню.
15 minutes, so let's have one more round of questions. Please, one by one. You please, and then Bogdan. Natalia Freik, Viewpoint Information Agency, and I have a question about relations with the Propilla, Vuhilya, and other mines. So DTEK is supposed to get compensation, right, for the equipment which will be handed over to the state. Can you please tell us about the core equipment and what was inside the compensation package for premature termination of lease, and whether you plan to also develop these mines further?
Speaking on the return of Dobropolya coal, we were in control of Dobropolya coal for 10 years, and we have invested $400 million in that asset. Currently, it's capable of operation. The fixed cost for the production of coal is 3 times less. The load is much higher than the state mine. And after Pavlohrad Uholy, this is the best coal mine in the country. Then, why we have taken this decision? The decision was taken because we need to balance the production and the consumption of the coal. And we can see that the resources of the Pavlograd coal would be enough to supply our TPPs. And that ideology of creating a holding for Centrenergo and the coal resources, this is the ideology which we believe correct, and that is the vertical integration of coal. It's operating, it's efficient, and in our discussions with the ministry, Dobropolya is the best coal-producing asset, and it will continue to operate properly in close connection with the state, and will be fairly profitable and fairly comfortable for the possible investors. So this is the logic. Speaking on the transfer, it took over 6 months within the rules and legislation that we had at that period of time, and after we've transferred, there was a debt in the rent of around 230 million. We paid that, and it was part of our agreement with the state property fund. We paid all the debts for Dobropolya coal, and that is the company which is ready to continue to produce the coal. And starting from the 25th of January, this is the state property. And out of those 400 million US dollars, there was some equipment that we've bought that is underground. And if you would try to replace that with the new one, it would be it would cost more. So we run the inventory of all this equipment, and we've identified the list of equipment that is necessary for the production cycle. So this equipment was bought from our company. Speaking of the contract, we have bought the resources of Dobropolya coal for February and March. The price that we have paid is 1,950 hryvnias per ton. The production capacity is 330,000 tons. So today, there is a price of 1,650. Now we paid 1,950, and this is the indicator of what is the change of the price, because 1,650 is the artificial price. That was the price that existed when there was a price for Rotterdam at around 45 euros. Well, we still have 1,650. So we paid the price that is closer to the one that we have for our own TPPs. 250,000 tons of supply at the price of 1,980 hryvnias per ton. But the payment is provided afterwards. There was a change in the payment policy, was taken into consideration the situation that we had. And once more, I would like to say that the largest share of the coal that is being transported to Center Energo, most of that coal is imported.
Now please, Bogdan.
Zeika Bogdan. My question relates to the question from Business Center and Economic Pravda. Just recently, DTEK mentioned to create an investment office in London. Who is going to lead this office? And is it true that you will be the one to coordinate the work of this office? It's true. One of my tasks would be to support further international development of our country. We plan to construct wind energy facilities, and we want to invest on other renewables, and we will provide further on statements on our projects and renewables. We have to reinforce our work in that area, and we want to introduce an absolutely greater level of quality. We have a lot of resources, but we need to provide clear information on the available opportunities in Ukraine. And in the frames of our strategy, I have already mentioned that one of the most important narratives is the partnership. And so all the cooperation with the potential partners that we invite in our business, in our joint projects, all of them would be led through the office in London. We have a lot of plans, and we want to turn DTEK into an international company. And you said that this will be coordinated through London's office. Are you going to be located in London? Well, I'll be in London and Ukraine. We have a lot of offices in Ukraine as well, not only in London. The base for DTEK is in Ukraine. This is where all the production facilities are located. This is where all the workforce is located. This is where we have the benefits. We have an experience in engineering and the construction of renewable facilities. Of course, all the bases, all the foundation facilities, it will be located in Ukraine and will remain in Ukraine. It's not that Dmitry Sakharuk would lead DTEK. It's not about the issue of who's going to lead DTEK. Could you simply approve or disapprove all those myths about the management of DTEK? I mean, why? You're not happy about my work? Well, what is the reason for all those myths and gossips? Well, thank you for the good assessment of our work and of my work as well. If I'll have that information from our management, I will tell you. Interfax Ukraine, and a few more details on restructuring. We've waited for that long ago. Could you mention the price for the restructuring, any limitations, the covenants that the company is ready to accept for this year and for the next year? Speaking on restructuring, and this is an important event. A year ago, somewhere in April, we started negotiations on the restructuring of our debt to Ukrenergo. This is also a function of a corporate center. And why we had to do that, I think I've illustrated that quite explicitly, and I want to express words of gratitude to our partners and investors for their readiness to wait. That was a professional conversation, and the arguments that we've provided were accepted. In the end, we've reached a commercial solution. We've publicly stated the key aspects of that solution. We have different holdings, production holdings as well, with different balance, and they're sort of separated from one another. Each one has its own area of specialization and a funding structure, and we had a debt of oil and gas business segment. We've converted that debt into the bonds of DTEK Naftogaz for the total amount of $425 million with a coupon of 6.25, and that is the fair conditions. And this amount will be dedicated from the amount of debt. So the debt would be $1.7 billion. So we are restructuring this debt, and there would be a new bond release converting the bank debts as well as the bonds that we exist today. So we won't have any banking debt. This would be a public tool with their percentage rate of 5% this year and up to 7% till the end of the year. This year, we have agreed that the minimum amount of repayment, in order to avoid any overdue problems, will be paying $25 million per year as a repayment of debt, and the remainder of the funds upon the pay of the excise duty and the taxes. All of that will be spent for repayment of bonds. I believe that the possibility to repay those bonds would allow us to repay the debt, and hopefully the debt would be dropped to $870 million in the period of restructuring, which would be refinanceable in the end of restructuring and within the life cycle of the bond that we have. So this is very briefly. Speaking on the limitations, they are fairly standard limitations in the work. One of the conditions is the introduction of independent board member. From the legal standpoint, it will take around 3 months, and it was a great pleasure for me to inform our creditors that you can delegate your own person as part of the board directors, and he would understand our inner kitchen, so to say, and the inner connections.
Ми вже працюємо майже 1,5 години.
Asking one or two questions.
And speaking about the indicators,
Дмитро, будь ласка. Зараз Дмитро.
could you please comment the situation in this TPP? When are you planning to start the commissioning and the testing? And the second, is the company interested in constructing new facilities that are using gas for producing electricity? Thank you. That's an important question. The current market situation simply prevents us from implementing any other projects. We don't have a proper market. We don't have any indicators that would say that those projects could be refundable. We don't have the economic base for that. We decided not to wait for the moment when this economic base would allow us to do that. So we decided to make a test of around 1 megawatt capacity, 1 megawatt per 1.5 megawatts on the base of Zaporozhye station. We've already supplied the equipment. We will invite you somewhere in April. We will tell you how this works. We need not only to work and process the technology, we need to prepare proper regulatory framework. When we'll implement this project, we'll provide a proper experience, so to say, for the other players, because a lot have to be made on the terms of regulations, how the price is being controlled, how the price is set. We'll try to work with the regulator. We will try to understand what sort of price indicators do we need, what sort of economy do we need for having that project mathematically reproduced. If we'll have a positive results, then the next project would be something around 50 megawatt. This is something that we think of. And definitely I mentioned the future of DTEK energy. This is the ability to participate in the balancing market. We've monitor those projects. Our priority is the energy consumption and the energy production, but this is not a priority. When we've compared the technologies, we believe that the storage systems they are more beneficial if compared with the renewable energy production. It's easier for us to take a look at the storage capacities together with the wind production facilities rather than doing anything else. Besides, people keep saying about the green hydrogen, and we want to be leaders on that in Ukraine. We're actively working to launch the pilot project by the end of 2021. We're talking about the green hydrogen.
Дякую, колеги. Анастасія, будь ласка.
Anastasia.
I have a quick question. My name is Anastasia. You mentioned in your presentation that underfunding in the sector caused emergencies at the stations. Right now, the situation with financial rehabilitation in the market is not very dynamic. So how probable it is that next winter the level of emergencies at the stations will be close to the level of this year?
It will be greater. I can tell you for sure. If not for the changes that we're talking about today, then we'll have a much greater forced outage rate at our TTPs. We shouldn't use we should look at that transparently. We have not managed to solve the problem systematically. If the NPPs or the TPPs wouldn't have resources for doing repairs and maintenance, I'm not talking about the construction of new energy production units or overhauls, and I want to remind you that we have spent a lot of money on the reconstruction of our energy production units. Out of 25 units, we have retrofitted 22. And it is because of this retrofittings that we have completed, we've managing to produce that much energy and electricity. And this is the largest question that we have to the ministry and to the regulator. They have to create preconditions allowing to do the maintenance repair. You know that 70 or 80% is the wear-out rate of the grids and facilities. We need to allocate proper amount of money for the maintenance repairs, because we are using the facilities that we have received from the past. The only great thing is that we're trying to use more renewable facilities, but now the construction has been stopped because the investors, they cannot continue with the implementation of those projects. This is a comprehensive story, and if not for more decisions to be taken in that area, we'll have greater problems for outage. You said that forced outage rate would increase next year. Next year, we'd have to work for 2 weeks in the autonomous mode. If we'll have similar situation as it is, then it would mean that we would not be able to join the energetic system. Yes. If we'll have this similar financial situation, it will have similar situation with the rules of the market and troubles with the regulations. If the same situation we'll have with the technical condition, then nobody is waiting for us in Europe. Nobody's going to have more headaches. And the NRC told us that the president has instructed that TPPs to produce and to store coal in the TPPs. Well, we're talking about the next summer. Well, if the president told us to do that, we'll do that. So let me put it that way. Ukrainian energy sector. I wanted to clarify the situation. If we won't be able to join the European grid, are there any sanctions? And the last question, you mentioned that DTEK is inclined to use the energy storage technology rather than gas generation. Are they the same in terms of the price you need to pay for the implementation of those options? Well, speaking on the first question, I don't think that I know all the details, but we are postponing the synchronization for a long period of time. I don't think there will be any sanctions imposed, but really they may think of us as a country that keep providing commitments but fail to comply with those commitments. And it will have an impact on the investors as well. And I think these are even greater sanctions than the other one. Speaking on the storage of energy, it's the technology which is more sort of understandable to us, considering the development of green energy production, and we want to tie all of those aspects. From the financial standpoint, the energy storage is less expensive, and both of those technologies, they don't have a market to be used. So we are undertaking certain steps, but it's a question to the regulator. What sort of technology should we use, in fact? Well, have you tried to calculate the costs for the construction? Well, the energy storage is more beneficial from the financial standpoint.
Фінальне запитання від вас.
Regarding the NTCE, I've heard a lot of discussions. So let me put the question this way. 40 energy production units are available at DTEK. How many of them would be terminated upon the synchronization? We have 37 operable units. Currently, 27 are operating. And how many of them would be stopped? I don't want to let anyone be afraid, of course. For some stations, Pushtinska and others, it will be hard for them to remain competitive. It's not about the quality, it's about the transportation of coal, because the transportation route is fairly large, and that has an impact on the competitiveness So in some cases, they might be burning the coal from Poland or many others. So there is no direct calculations like how many units do we need to terminate. Let's take a look at the market behavior as well as the conditions under which we shall introduce the synchronization efforts. And the Commission is about to implement the B mechanism. How do you prepare yourself and your company for that? Because this is an additional sort of excise tax on the electricity produced by the company. Well, we are actively participating in the discussions at the level of the ministry, as well as with our international partners. Our position, which is fairly public, that CBAM, that is the tax for boundaries, this is not the one that should be introduced in relation to Ukraine. This is unjust. And what we heard from our foreign partners, if the payment for emissions would be aligned with the European standards, then this CBAM tax would be unjustified. So our position is to continue with the reforms in the payment for emissions in Ukraine. We implement the ETS, the emission trading system, for the trading of quotes, as it is done in Europe, so that the money out of those trades would remain in Ukraine, and we would be able to use those money to retrofit production, to develop green production. So already this year we are trying to develop the monitoring system in order to launch the ETS in Ukraine. And if Ukraine will make its home task and will align the system of emission trades to the European, then we would have certain results. But we have to understand the European realities, because some of the European countries had 5, 10, or 15 years to spend in order to introduce a proper ETS. This is one of the key tasks for our government, together with the ministry. They have to conduct fruitful negotiations with the European partners. They have to prepare certain discussions that won't have a CBAM, will have European standards for emission payments, and then there will be a certain transitionary period. Because if you take today's price of 30 euro per megawatt of emissions, now you might imagine how much an increase in electricity price would we have. This is a political solution, and hopefully the Ukraine will have a strong position in that negotiation and will not allow to have any severe requirements imposed on the industry. And this is even more important for the industrial producers.
Colleagues, thank you very much. We are over time, so thank you very much. Thank you for those who, in spite of the bad weather, came to us. Thank you for watching us online. So if you have any questions, please send those questions to pressconference@dtek.com, and you can see that address at the bottom of the page where you're watching the broadcast. We will be able to respond to all the questions. And a final remark by Maxim Timchenko.
Once again, I'd like to express words of gratitude for your attention, your questions, your criticism. There wasn't too many of that, but we pay attention to your articles, especially your articles, Sergey. But believe me, 2023 is the year that we need to approach all together. In many cases, we receive information through the prism of the interests of the market, but when the professional journalists are mentioning that, when they provide certain arguments and information, then many people would listen to that. So hopefully we'll have a joint vision on the synchronization of the markets in 2023. And believe me, we will live in an absolutely different world of energy.